Hello, folks. Let me change
Hello.
my names here. So, all right. Welcome, Jen. Where are you calling from today?
I'm calling from the Pacific Northwest.
I recognize the weather. I live in Portland, so it looked like the
There
same as
you go.
outside my window.
Did you just survive about 8 inches of rain?
I did. I went down to put something in the basement. I thought, oh, there's some water here.
Oh no.
Yeah, so I'll go fix it up after class. Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too. Hello, Diego.
Hello.
And where are you today?
Still in Milan, midnight here.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Oh gosh.
A brave person.
No, there wasn't any suitable other slots for me this week, so.
Hmm. Hmm. And there's Kim. He's got his AI generated background there.
Yes,
Yeah, fabulous.
That's
little bit of festive
That's not
feeling.
real.
A little bit of what, Kim?
I said a little festive, feeling,
Yeah,
right?
well, that's good.
Post Thanksgiving, pre-Christmas, right?
Yeah, I gotta sort of carry the spirit through the end of the year. Um, all right, a few other people coming in here. And Shwanoa, how are you today? You're on mute, I think, or we can't hear you.
Okay, I'll
There we
probably
go.
need my
Now we
earphone.
can hear you.
Okay,
And how are you today?
I'm good.
Excellent. And there's Colleen. Hello. And how do you pronounce your name? Luru? Can you help me pronounce your name?
Sorry, I was on mute.
That's okay.
Yes, it's Liru, thanks.
Liru.
Yes.
And where are you today?
Oh, I'm from Edmonton, Canada.
Okay, wonderful. And Karen, good to see you. All right.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Yeah. Hmm. Now, how are all the recoveries going in your life?
Pardon?
So how are all the recoveries going in your life?
Oh, they're going pretty good. They're not there yet, but
Okay,
we're managing, which is good.
that's good.
Mm-hmm. Thanks
Okay,
for
let's
asking.
see. Someone's got a phone call coming in.
I'm sorry.
Okay. So maybe we'll make this our theme show music or something. we need theme show songs for the programs. So I've got some slides in a bit, but mostly I just want to check in and see what brought you here today and how this time could be useful for you.
I'm still looking forward to do the program, and I hope that you will have something arranged for people in Europe, but I understand you have in terms of time zones.
Yes, we have
Okay.
two time zones, 2 times every class at 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. Eastern time, which for you would be what 6
4 p.m. and
yeah, and late. Yeah.
For me, it's just to get myself up to speed and get ready for the program when it starts in January. I'm really pumped about it.
Excellent. Excellent.
So I'm new to the whole shebang
Okay.
and to the whole gig. So just kind of learning what it is I don't know and then be able to ask questions to find out.
And what kind of work do you do now?
I'm a spiritual counselor.
Okay.
So a lot of, it's not quite spiritual direction. I do a lot of eco-chaplaincy.
Wow.
Kind of, it's a sort of freelance.
Cool. And you?
I like it. I love it.
And Kim, what brings you here today?
Well, two things, David. One, it's probably been a couple of years since I had an opportunity to hear about ID Way, and I thought perhaps things had evolved some. So I wanted to come up to date on that. And then, yeah, the other thing was just kind of confirming my own thinking because of my past participation in the narrative coaching program. It seemed like the ID Way would be the next logical thing for me to engage in. And so just kind of
Okay.
reaffirming that too.
All right, wonderful. And Karen, I
Awesome.
think you signed up for next year. Is that true? You're on mute again. You're,
I think I did. I'm not sure when so I need someone just to double check that. I thought
Oh.
I would do this stage of, okay, I signed up, but I'm like, did I sign up already? Can't remember.
yeah, and we can look really quickly when we're done, and Steve can get back and confirm that with you. There will be an email you'll get after this that has a registration link and stuff, so you can always go in and check that way too. Yeah.
Thank you.
And Srinwal, what brings you here today?
Me?
Yes, you.
Oh, just know what's ID.
Okay.
What's ID about?
Okay. All right. Well, let me just give you a little bit of historical context for ID in general, but then in particular where it is now. Probably not too long after I started narrative coaching, I had been doing a lot of large scale change projects. So clients kept saying, could you bring narrative coaching to us? Could you scale narrative coaching? And I think, well, yeah, I could, but I'm not sure that's really the best use of narrative coaching. But and I was sort of tired of traditional OD. I ended up in these projects largely in the Pacific Northwest, largely for the state of Oregon, but some federal projects where I had the opportunity to work with 2 or 3 core leaders as they moved departments and moved projects. We did some federal evaluation projects. In all of those, I started to recognize that what they really needed from me was to just be David and not have a hat of OD consultant or trainer or coach. I was getting exhausted trying to describe myself. And so they just started saying, they would just ring me up, can you just come be David? We need David. And then I had an opportunity to, which is a case study we'll study a lot in the program, an opportunity or an invitation from a woman that ran a large program in the Portland area that served disabled children. And it's a really difficult environment because you have many different jurisdictions, you have lots of lawyers, you have lots of bureaucrats, you have lots of families with more needs than people have resources for. And she was just really looking for something different, particularly thinking about how coaching could help her. And so she had written a grant and gotten some money to hire someone to come teach coaching to their entire organization. And when we had that meeting, I declined and said, no, I won't take your money. And she was curious why. And I said, well, because I don't think it will get you what you want. And already I had become fairly disillusioned with training. And so I said, I'd rather do something else. And she goes, well, what should we do instead? And I said, I don't know, but I'll tell you in the morning. And I went home and kind of reviewed literally all over my office, reviewed all the projects I've been doing. And I said, which ones of these actually worked really well and why? What do they have in common? And again, it came back down to the freedom to move around the project. I could talk to the governor 1 hour, server builders the next hour, frontline staff the next hour, all in service of a vision for a larger project. So I thought, okay, that's what I want to do. I want to just be free to be with her and partner with her in the organization. But then I thought, I can't really teach that because it goes against what I'm discovering actually works. So what if I could do for everybody in the organization what I wanted to do myself, which is let them be themselves and let them self-direct and self-develop their approach to the changes they were seeking. I didn't have the word integrative development yet, but we came out and did a half-day workshop, mostly on the narrative coaching mindset, a little bit of ethnography, and a tiny bit of systems thinking. And then I sent them out into their own organization to observe themselves. And then that began and ended up being a 2-year journey to reinvent the organization from top to bottom. They were so successful that they got the state legislature to rewrite policy in their field. And ID was born. And as central to that was in those 2 years, we didn't do any training for 6 months. All we did was help them to notice themselves, begin to articulate what they might need. There's a number of models we teach you in the program that I invented there to help them do that on their own. So they became their own anthropologists. And then along the way, they started discovering things like, oh, we're like totally addicted to a medical mindset, which is basically is the story behind it. We're the experts and you're not. And then I started just dropping little observations like you might see this child 1 to 2 hours a week. Guess who's with them the other 24/7? It's not you. And so they began to think about what does that mean? And they came to this realization about their aspiration, which was our job is to help these families flourish. If the families flourish and their systems flourish, then they'll take better care of their kids and be more informed about how to help them. And so they moved kind of to the background and decentered themselves a bit. And they started seeing way better results. And then they started realizing, oh, there's some skills we don't have. We're really good at lecturing. We're really good at information giving. We're really good at all these things, but we don't know how to do that. So what would you like to learn? Well, I don't know. And so then they started, again, investigating themselves. And then I would say, well, who in your organization is really good at that? Why don't you go talk to them? And so they did a lot of sort of pure learning for a while until they got to the point where some more formal information and coaching methods were helpful. And so then we would always co-present with people in the organization. So I never did a single workshop in 2 years by myself. And so out of that, then I started getting more requests for this. And so then I thought, I better figure out what this is. And so I did what I do best, which is to reflect on and articulate what I'm noticing and what I know from the literature and what I know from my own lived experience. And so I created what became integrative development, which started as, because of my background, as an integration of coaching, training, and OD into a single practice. And then evolved now into a pretty provocative learning and development pedagogy or theory. And ironically, one of the most influential sources for that pedagogy are progressive child psychologists and educators. So the basic premise of ID now is that we will help you learn how to identify and liberate the potential for growth in any moment in time. So it means we don't create massive curriculums. We don't tend to have massive agendas. And so we've developed a whole way of working such that whether you're doing a traditional program like a training or a facilitation or a consultation or a coaching session, you can accelerate the capacity to figure out what's actually possible here and how do I help make that happen. And what is new, like for Kim, what's new this year, and will be the same next year, is we found that asks a lot out of people that are trained in more traditional methodologies, and to have the courage to just stand there in some degree in the unknown with your client. And so I developed this body of work called narrative release, which is sort of the spiritual philosophy that underpins everything that I do. And we realized that would actually be really helpful if we take away some of the content, which we did in our pilot around trauma and grief, and that's all going to go into a program for next year. Then it's really about how do you develop yourself philosophically and spiritually to be able to stand there and be with people in terms of discerning what they think they're ready for and what you could help them make possible. And so what we found this year, better than any year we've done with the addition of the NR work, is that people were more willing to try things sooner. One of the things that we've been in many ways brainwashed to believe in school is we can only do things after we've studied them. If you think about what it was like for most of us as children, we just did stuff. Yeah, we broke arms and we hurt the cat, and we broke things, but that joy and that immediacy of learning, which is what we're hardwired to do, is beaten out of us, in terms of going through school and corporate jobs, careers and trainings, and all of which is fine. It's not like we're replacing that, but it's very limited in terms of it's very expert centric. It's very structured. You're supposed to have to figure out what is needed before you even began. Like for me, I just found it ludicrous that somebody wanted me to architect a perfect curriculum before I'd met a single participant. I said, how am I going to know? And then there's no credence for what these people already know, what they're already good at, what they care about, what they actually need. And you could have 30 people, and I had this doing all these really fancy leadership programs. You could have 30 people in the same room for the same topic, and they need 30 different things. There's no curriculum on the planet that's going to make all of them happy. So why am I killing myself to please somebody in HR who wants to have all this signed off on before we've even began? And so I began to develop this methodology I found it was too difficult to get buyers to buy this straight out. So what we would just call it a training, and then we would do it the ID way. And the participants loved it, absolutely loved it. And the easiest way is, so most of my sponsors and projects were not from HR. HR came later. Most of them were for people that were either directors of something or people in the business or in their organization who had a very clear issue that they wanted addressed. And so we have some very innovative ways in which we help them do that. Yeah, so the program now is, I find, it's in some ways the purest of the work that I do. It doesn't focus as much on stories as narrative coaching, but you'll recognize, like Kim, you'll recognize the philosophy straight away. But it allows you to just free yourself to notice, what can I do right now to make this a developmentally useful time for this person. So I'm going to stop there and see kind of what that might bring up for you. Then I'll pull up some slides and we can go into a little bit more context about the program itself. Erin.
Well, I'm excited. I mean, I'm thrilled about the direction it's going. As someone who's been in HR, been a trainer, have worked on organizational development,
Yeah.
all of that, it's so true. Is trying to. It doesn't work to cram everybody in a box.
No. And the beauty of this for all of you is that I've created ID to be now part of the value of what it's become is that it's become a standalone theory and model of development and learning, which means that it's no longer tied to OD training and coaching. So our whole last module is nothing but enabling you to create your own unique ID practice. So for Jan, it'll be, I mean, I have a spiritual development background as well. So that creeps in there too, but everybody, so we've had, like last year, we had 2 doctors in this last cohort, and one was retired, one not. And they're trying to figure out how to survive corporate medicine. And so we're in a time when a lot of our institutions are not working well, but nobody really has any idea. So some people retrench and try to regress to go backwards. And other people are wandering around trying to sell something, but it's not really. And so I feel like this is a building block for, what a lot of our younger generations are instinctively doing. But how do we help the older generations that are still in the workplace free themselves to actually go learn again? Yeah. And what I've found when this goes well is we can achieve better results in less time and less budget by far. Yes, Jan.
Something that comes up a lot in my mind while you're speaking, particularly most recently, is agency.
Mm-hmm.
People having agency and sovereignty. Yeah. And that just didn't occur in the 50s, 60s, even 70s.
Yeah.
You followed the path of the generations before you. And I'm just so thrilled. I'm definitely in the right place. I'm just so thrilled to hear of this desire to help everybody discover their agency
Yeah.
and their sovereignty.
I think one of the things I've started to appreciate, Jan, is so I grew up in the Bay Area of California in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And I couldn't imagine in some ways a better place to grow up at that time. I wouldn't want to live there now again, which I have, but in the past. But I started to really appreciate what an anomaly that period, particularly in the US, was. And we're modeling our assumptions about development and learning around a world that doesn't exist anymore. It didn't exist in many parts of the world, but it certainly doesn't exist even in the US anymore. And so we have a lot of our participants have children like in their 20s who are just really struggling, like, what is university? Why should I go? What should I be doing? What is the liberal arts worth now? You know, and everything's upside down. And so we don't have a lot of reference points around that. And so for me, I think the idea of agency is really essential to this. And in actually, I can't think of any, in all of the projects I've done, agencies at the front and center. So everybody brings something that matters to them that they want to have be different. And then they find other people that have the same interest. And so they start helping each other. And as part of that, the other side of agency is I don't take on any client for which participation is mandatory. So we have in all of our projects, it follows a relative bell curve. A third of the people are ecstatic. They're like kids in a candy shop. They're running 1,000 miles an hour day one because they can't believe that somebody's going to let them do this. And then there's half that are kind of wandering around. They're interested. They kind of see the value, but they're not quite sure. And then there's a third that, I dare you to make me do this, right? And great, then don't come. I love you, but go away. And what happens all the time is that the people in the middle go, wow, those people over there are having way much more fun. They seem to be making things better for their teams are happier, and I'm going to be on their team because it's like way better. And most of them migrate to the people that are actually doing things. And every now and then you get somebody who's kind of holding out that kind of jumps over. But oftentimes that's the director or the executive's responsibility to figure out what to do with them. But what happens over time is that the results start becoming so profoundly different that most of the leaders end up wanting to do something about that. But again, we want to respect everybody's right to autonomy and agency. So if you don't want to participate, then don't come. You're not going to find value in it. You're going to annoy us and slow us down. And so it becomes this learning laboratory where the early adopters start sort of showcasing what does this work look like in that context. They start being able to help each other. And so it becomes quite fun. And then whenever I have colleagues on my projects, especially, I used to do some work for business schools, and I stopped now, but it was trying to get these people to stop lecturing. So it was in a typical ID workshop, we might have half an hour of teaching. And it's usually little bites that are just really relevant to like a large group of people. They just do a little piece there and then they'll move on. And the rest of the time, I've asked them to be coaches. And even that, we did a huge project for the Victorian government with all the people at the very top of their government. And I needed, because of the volume of people and the intensity over 30 days, I needed help. And so I picked 5 coaches that I had trained. One I had not, but I knew well. And I had them come in for just like to be with me in one of the first programs. And I only picked one of them because the other 4 wanted to coach. I said, I don't want you to be a coach. I want you just to be here for them, to be what they need to get the most out of this, what we're doing. And because all they could do is launch into, hey, so tell me about, no, they couldn't stay out of role. And so that I find that wasn't really helpful. And the one that I didn't know well, but I trusted a lot because I knew of her, was quite agile because of her own background and just morphed into whatever the group needed at that point in time. Yeah. Are there other thoughts or questions for right now? And otherwise I can show you some slides. Kim.
Yeah, I was curious, David, if you'll, maybe the slides will answer some of it, but if you could just sort of speak to the narrative release and what that is. I mean, I kind of have a notion, but my notion might be right.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what I'm thinking. I'm kind of assuming that part of moving in and sort of being in the moment and not being tied to anything really means kind of letting go of I'll call it sort of the boundaries of your comfort zone, right? To the stories that got you there. I don't know if that's right, but that's my guess.
That's true. That is part of it for sure. It began because I kept getting requests. Well, what do I do as a narrative coach when I encounter people with trauma, or an organization that maybe had a big downsizing and there's grief everywhere and no one's talking about it, and people that wanted to go deeper on attachment theory. So it's called it's an acronym of GATES. So grief, attachment, trauma, embodiment, and shadow. So I'm going to move all that to a separate project next year. But what was left was the same philosophy you would know from narrative coaching, which was that we're walking alongside another human being who's trying to go somewhere, do something, become something. And but that's within the comfort of a construct called coaching. And so but I thought, well, it seems a shame that all that work is only in coaching. And I see all these opportunities in other disciplines like training and OD, change management, facilitation. Gosh, wouldn't that be great there? And so I've pulled out most of the stuff related to things like grief and trauma. There's a little bit in there still, but the narrative release part is basically the closest thing you'd find in the outer world would be Taoism and a bit of Buddhism. And it has a lot to do with what is our role in these spaces. And so, like, for example, one of the tools we use is a breathing cycle, which has advanced quite a bit since we first did the program, which was Shinwan, I think you were in. And it really has a lot to do with using your breath and your energy to help people let go of things and notice what they can notice when they've let go of things, and then to see what's trying to emerge, and then to integrate that into themselves. And so we use that a lot in this practice, and a lot of our ID people use this now, because clients, when they are often very uncomfortable. So Diego, thank you for coming, and let us know if we can be of more help. Otherwise, we'll see you soon. Okay?
Yeah, for the narrative coaching, the one-on-one, and not for group or organization things.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, bye-bye, sorry.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Have a great day. I'm going to bed.
So a lot of our practitioners use that breathing cycle to help clients embody what the process that they're in, to notice themselves. And because of the sort of consumerist capitalist system we live in, there's so much about inhaling and consuming, bringing in, taking on. And many of us, but certainly many of our clients, are overwhelmed by the world we've created. And so the last thing we want as an ID practitioner is to give them more. So most of our early work with them is what would you have to let go of in order to make space for what it is you think you want. And we help them with that. So that's where some of the grief work does come in, and of the letting go, but using our breath and the exhale, and then sort of noticing what becomes present, what's available to you now that was not before. So and I'll give you just a really concrete example of how we use this. So when we were doing some practices in the early days of the disabilities organization, they would come in, they would scan a child's notes and then just start talking to the parent. And so there was two things that we helped them notice about themselves. One was when a parent would stop talking, they would inhale. Why? So they could start talking back to the parent. So we started saying, what would it be like if you exhaled first? So we built in this practice. Well, immediately 3/4 of what you were about to say, you don't have to say anymore. You bought yourself some time to actually pay attention. Oh, what's happening to the parent now that they've been talking to me? Oh, they've got a tear in their eye, or they're looking really frustrated. Oh, I might want to respond to that. The second thing that we we observed for them is that many of them were petrified. Well, that's going to create silences that I'm used to filling with my technical jargon. And then they started noticing their own discomfort of being quiet. And so we know that people fill in voids with something if they feel uncomfortable. And so, so one of the moments what we spent a lot of time on was, what do you do in the first minute of a conversation? And what do you do when a client has said something to you? Those were the 2 points where they were most often likely to revert back to their old mindset and behavior. So we use the narrative release to help them notice what happens to your body and your breathing when a client is talking to you. And where's your energy? For most of them, it's up in their head. Oh, I know about this, or they should know this, or they should do that. And so we would teach them to like just breathe out through their toes and get out of their head. And then, well, then if my head is empty, then what am I supposed to be doing? Like, what is my job? And what value am I going to bet because then to them, I'm just sitting there. You know, I've got a schedule and I got 9 more kids coming after them and all this anxiety of what should we do? And so a lot of it was helping them learn to manage themselves. And it goes back to why we do this, because I realized that the only thing I really paid attention to was, what is this human ready for right now? Everything else is moot for the most part. And so we, as people that do what we do, we love our material, we love what we know, we love what we've done. And so we get really excited and really active with that. But none of that matters if the person that you're talking to doesn't know what to do with it, or isn't confident enough to do with it, or doesn't have permission in their home to do it. And so we just help them say, you know, put everything that you know in your back pocket or in your purse or on the table. It's all right there. If any of it's needed, you know exactly where to get it, and just put it down for a few minutes and just talk to a human being who's struggling to take care of a child that's very challenged. And yeah, so again, it goes back to those really critical moments in time. What's the potential here for learning and growth in myself as a practitioner and in the person I'm talking to? Yeah.
Thank you, David. Yes, I was wrong about where that was going, but thank you very much for sharing it.
Well, so I would say you weren't wrong. You were just, you had a piece of the puzzle.
Oh.
That, because what you said is true, but it's much more than that now. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah. And Jen, if you're wanting us to hear what you're saying, then or maybe just speaking to yourself. Okay. Well, I hope you were happy with what you said to yourself. Yeah, there you go. Anything else you'd like to ask for now, or share about what's coming up for you in all this? And then maybe I'll show you a few slides. I've already covered some of them, but all good? Okay, let me just share some of the slides we haven't covered, because it'll give you a bit more information, and then I can share with you about the logistics of the program itself. Move this over here so it's in front of me. This is one of my anchors I keep coming back to. I think one of the things that I cherish most about this work is it instills in practitioners a profound humility, enormous strength and enormous capability, but enormous humility. And you start to, when people are no longer commodified as participants in a large program, but are human beings, we start to realize we have no idea who they are, what they're bringing, what they're dealing with, what they're afraid of. And so going back to the notion of agency, allows each person to be on their own journey in the same program. And then we start putting them together in different combinations to help each other. And it just seems to work much better. So we already did some of this. We don't need to do that. Yeah. So for me, a lot of the ID is like playing jazz. And an example that I use a lot is an apocryphal saying or a quote from an interview with a well-known older gentleman, African-American gentleman who was well-known in his musical craft. And they were asking him about how he learned to play so well and how he got to be where he was. And so they asked, well, where did you study music, or did you study music? And he said, yeah, I studied lots of music up until the point it got in the way of my playing. And then I stopped studying. And I thought, how wonderful. And so there's the ID ways of philosophy. There's a piece of work called The Five Maturities, which is a report I'm writing for the Institute of Coaching at Harvard, moving away from more sterile competency models to look at how do we actually grow as humans so we can do this work. There's some inner capacities that you'll develop, as well as outer capacities to be able to stand with other people. And then there's a set of practices in the program that will help you kind of free yourself to be able to work this way. Yeah, and so what you notice in your work will become much more expansive than you ever thought possible. And this last piece, notice out loud and speak plainly, is something that I observed myself doing as I got deeper and deeper into this work. A lot of what I would just say very, very simply, and I was just noticing out loud. Like I'm noticing that you look really tired right now. Period. Or I'm noticing that this half of the room is not talking. And I don't try to label it or do anything about it. I'm just naming things. And I'm finding we're just sort of bringing these things into the room, and it does wonderful. We already, I'll tell you that story if you're in the program, but let's move. Yeah, and so part of this is we're just trying to understand what does this person think is happening? What is it they think they're trying to learn? And what is the next step they would need to take? And so as we do that, then we can bring what we know about what we're doing to serve them as they take that next step. So this is a painting that was my first Aboriginal painting I got in one of my early trips to working in Australia. And I just love this metamorphosis. But you can, I think I did this way. But what we're often done in traditional training is build a program for this. And magically we're supposed to be somewhere else, but we're not quite sure what that looks like, but there's a natural progression that people are on and things they're trying to do, that all we're really trying to do is dissolve what's in their way to help them become what they were trying to become anyways. We're not taking them somewhere else. We're not transforming them. We're actually just noticing what is the journey they're on, what's their next step that might get them closer to what it is that they want. So I'm just going to see that. So this structure is not really anything that we're imposing. It's just we're holding that as a frame by what we're seeing. And so one of the frames we use a lot in the program, and then I'll kind of move into some more of the details of the program itself, is this idea of structured emergence. So one of the child psychologists we draw on is Lev Vygotsky, who you may know from his idea about zones of proximal development, which is basically his observation of young children. And effective parenting is really understanding, what is this child almost ready to do that with one little bit of help, they could make it. The easiest example I can think of is when a toddler has learned how to stand up, but can only stand up if they're holding onto your pant leg. Your pant leg is the scaffolding. It's the last step. They can't learn how to stand and balance at the same time. So if you remove the need for them to balance, because that's provided by holding on to you, they can just sort of settle into, I can stand. But structure is not enough, because that only works if there's somebody with pant legs nearby. Like the dog may not be so cooperative or happy that you're holding on to the dog. And so, or if you're trying to find water, it's great if there's a faucet, but what if there's no faucet nearby? And so again, we try to create these artificial constructs called a training program. But again, what if and you give them beautiful water and teach them how to drink, but they go back to work and there's a desert, there's no water. Then what value is that? But you don't want just emergence. Then it's like trying to do this coaching on a bench. Oh, by the way, there's a tsunami coming. And so it overwhelms the bench. If there's no structure, it's pure emergence, then people don't feel safe and they don't learn either. And so what we're trying to do is create this idea of what we think of as structured emergence. And this is a photo from next to my house where I used to live in Northern California. It's an estuary. And there's a beautiful 2-mile hike around the estuary. And every time I took the hike, it was completely different. Depending on the season, the migrations, the tide, the rain, the temperature, and the land and the water just have this wonderful balance between each other. And so that's what we're doing with this idea of beautiful constraints or focusing people's freedom. And so our job is to notice, like you would with a young child, what is this person ready for now? If they just had this one little piece, it would be enough, the structure for them to actually let what they're trying to learn or develop emerge. But we can't know that ahead of time. We mostly only notice that in the moment. And so hence we teach people how to do this in any moment in time. Okay. And the easiest way for most of our participants to take this on is to begin to think about, where could I bring this to what I already do? Rather than trying to reinvent or invent something brand new, what could I do differently? And so I'll give you a simple example of structured emergence. And I'll tell you more about this case if you're in the class, but I worked with a large bank when I was living in Australia, and I was working with a business school, and they had just won their biggest contract ever to provide a suite of 7 leadership programs for this huge bank. I was doing 2 of them. It just happened that my 2 were amongst the first 3 to be launched, so we were kind of the guinea pigs. They were going well enough, but I had this sort of apocryphal experience that any of you who've trained enough will recognize this. And you're always kind of looking for, like, who's really getting this? Like, who's switched on? They're really excited. Think, oh yeah, finally we're getting through. We're going to make a difference. And there was a woman in one of the second or third time we ran this leadership communication course. And she was very warm and very engaged and, really helpful. And then we're all leaving and, saying goodbye. And she said, thanks a lot. It was great. I got a couple of really good tips. I really appreciate that. Well, I had spent 6 months building this program, 2 days delivering the program. And I knew her, and she was pretty funny. So I knew her and I said, for $5, you could have bought me a pint and I could have told you the 2 tips and we could have gone home. You didn't need to sit here for 2 tips or 3 tips. So that was the last, I ended up leaving the business school, but that was the last corporate training I ever did. And then the CFO of the bank called the school and said, we want David's program on communication because we're really bad at it. And so we got a contract for that particular program. But I said, I will only do this if I get to do this my way, not the way they made me do it through HR and through the university. And both the university and HR protested. And then I said, here's the CFO's phone number. You tell him no, I'm not going to. And so they finally backed down because they wanted his money and they wanted the opportunity. So I went and met the CFO. He was great. He said, we are the financial brains of the bank, but no one listens to us because we're boring. Our slide decks are 5 times too long and we talk too much. And so we need to fix that. And so I said, if you could fix one thing about all that in the bank, what would it be? He said, well, like a lot of companies, we're over dependent on PowerPoint. So if you could help us deliver better presentations, that would be great. So I said, wonderful. So I said, I only have one request of you. I said, in order to do this in an ID-like way, everybody has to bring an actual slide deck to a presentation they're about to give. And he said, okay. And so I knew I have your permission to send them home if they don't have one. Yes. And here's give me his card, have them call me if they don't want to bring one, and I'll set them straight. And so people came and they were a bit sort of perplexed by all this, and they assumed that I was going to teach them some fancy communication tips and help them polish up their slides. And I said, no, actually, and this is the structure part. You get 4 slides, and you have to have 4 slides when you leave, and you can't leave until you have 4 slides. Oh no, yeah, we didn't have this giant uproar and panic, and it's basically the 4 slides built around the narrative coaching model, and which is a great communication tool. And then I had to spend a week to train and convince the 2 faculty, or had, let's just say, larger than life egos, to stop. They weren't going to be able to teach. Their job was to coach. So anyways, long story short, we were moving through the day, and these people were bringing like 40, 50, 60 slide decks for 30-minute presentations, right? It was just death. It was like just horrible. And so I said, however many you brought, here's the structure for the 4 slides you have to create. And here's the minimum font size, because someone tried to sneak in like 4-point font or something. and then they go, what do I do with these 5 slides I made? And then we would coach them, like, why are they there? What purpose do you think they're serving? Why do you think your audience needs them? Audience? What about my audience? This is for them. This is not for you. Your presentation's only as valuable as they take value from it. And so we help them understand all the all the mindset pieces that went into creating those slide decks. And one by one, they just kept peeling away. You don't need that. You don't need that. And then having to deal with their anxiety, which is where the breathing cycle became very helpful, because many of them started hyperventilating on many occasions across the day. And so then and there were a couple of people that took a bit longer, but we stayed after and we coached them all the way to the bitter end until they all end up with their 4 slides. And I said, no, great. So go talk to that when you go give your speech next week. And here's a blank copy. So use this for any other speech or anything else you have to do for the rest of the time until the 6 weeks when we come back together again. Oh, I don't know if I can do this. Oh. I said, you'll be fine. Just go. And so they came back and they were just baffled, like, wow, it was so much easier than I thought. And I said, well, did you run into any problems? And he said, yeah, that people had questions, or maybe I didn't include enough. But before, I would have put all those slides in the deck. Now I just had it available to them and said, hey, I'll send you that file after we're done, right? So people that wanted more data or wanted more support. And so and so I didn't teach them anything about presenting. But in the course of going back to agency, Jen, of having to rethink their entire methodology for creating slide decks, they themselves were changing, because their role was going to change in how they were going to present. And they were just and they were so chuffed. And there was one woman, she said, I just coincidentally, I was going that night after our workshop to the board of the foundation of our bank with a proposal for some funding. And she said, if I'd gone with what I brought to your workshop, they would have given me $5,000, patted me in the head, and told me to go away. And she said, but I decided to go for it. And I used the slide deck I made like 2 hours before in your workshop. And we got one of the largest grants in the history of the foundation. So then everybody's like, oh, cool, I want that. And then we said, well, we have another surprise for you, because we only had half a day. So we were able to save them half a day's budget. We have another surprise for you. You know those 4 slides which we asked you to bring back? When you leave at noon, you get 1 slide. Oh no, more panicking, because they were quite cute. And I said, did we do well by you last time? Well, yeah, that was amazing. So do you trust us again? Okay, fine. And then we gave them, again, going back to, we don't want just random 1 slide. We gave them a structure for the 1 slide in which they could workshop it and make it whatever they wanted. Oh, and by the way, the CFO and the 4 group CFOs are coming at the end at noon to have lunch with you, and you're going to present your 1 slide. Again, more panic, and so we just help them find themselves in their 4 slides. And what are you really trying to say here? What do you really want? What's really in your heart that you want to get across to whoever you're going to be giving this to in real life. And the group CFOs came by and we had lunch together, and each person presented theirs very, very, very simple. It was a slide kind of like this, not much more complicated. And they were just blown away. Like, why did we not talk like this all the time? This must have been an amazing communication training. I said, we didn't teach them anything. All we did was coach their experience in working with their own slides. Yes, we had resources, and there were a couple of, like I said, like 10-minute teaching bits because there was some of them had the same problem. So we kind of gathered them, and we didn't teach anything to the whole group, but we found a little cluster of people with the same problem. And one of the guys on the team had a lot of expertise in this one particular dilemma they were facing. So he went out and did a little piece with them. They go, oh, okay. And they went back to work on their own. And pretty soon, somebody would come to say, well, they'd come to us because they're used to talking to trainers. Well, how do I do this? I'm not sure, but I know Bob over there, he's working on the same thing. Why don't you go talk to Bob? And then they'd partner up, and then, oh yeah. And by the end of the day, they forgot we were even there. They were just moving around like in a kindergarten, talking to each other. And then our only requirement was everybody had to share in a small group their 4 slides, and everybody had to say, yes, we approve. They're at a reasonable stopping point. And so for me, what I loved about this, and the CFO was just over the moon. And I said, yeah, keep the template, use it in whatever way you want. And for me, unlike all the other programs I ran through the university, where we were teaching stuff, we actually watched people change in front of our eyes. And not only changed as humans, but they had now a resource they could take with them and a presentation that was going to be way better. And the CFOs, I said, what I appreciate most is that people are now for the first time calling us and asking us to come talk to them. He said, that's never happened in the history of my time at the bank. They always dreaded when we came. Yeah, so that's kind of it's a long story, but an example of what structured emergence offers in the ID way of doing things. Okay. So thank you for your tolerance, I hope, in the long story, but it's one of my favorites. Anything you want to ask about that or about this idea before we just launch into a few things about the program itself? All good? Okay. All right. So the program has 9 modules over 9 months. It finishes up in early October. Every module is designed using the narrative coaching framework, which is how I've designed all my programs for 20 years. It starts with an initiation with me. It's a live Zoom session where we introduce the core material for that module, that topic. For some of the modules, there's also a bit of a bonus material if you want to go deeper on some of the topics. And then in true ID fashion, we don't come back the next week with more stuff. We actually send you out into the field to go do things, just like we would do in an ID project. So there's a total of 3 assignments every module. The first 2 are in week 2. One's a stretch assignment, which is a personal kind of reflection, a personal experience. It's trying to give you a flavor of what it's like to work this way or be this way. It's for you to kind of stretch yourself. And then the field assignments are things that relate to some of the skills that are involved, but rather than say, fall into the trap of most programs where we have to teach you this skill before you can go do that, we're just going to give you an assignment, ask you to go do it and notice what happens. Just like we would in an ID project in the beginning. We're not going to expect you to follow something I've taught you. We're going to go see what you would do this. What's your starting point? If you immerse yourself in this material and go try something based on what you think you're understanding, what if you went and just tried something? And so the field assignments are small and simple. They're really just meant to give you a taste of what we're trying to help you learn. And you're always welcome to not do it or change it or do something else, whatever would help you get closer to the material that we're teaching in that particular module. Implementation is a live session. I think for this next year, many of these will be with me as well. One of our faculty members has some things happening in their life that they may or may not be able to participate as a faculty member. We're not sure yet, but there always will be somebody, and often now I think it'll be me. And this is again, not more content. There might be a few little nudges in there, but most of it's reflecting on what are you discovering and trying to implement what you're learning in this module. We're trying to, again, model this around ID, which is much more about do first, learn second, or do as and learn at the same time. It's how we actually learn most things in real life. Training as an aberration that way. So, and then integration, we will put you into pods of generally 3 or 4 people in your time zone, ask you to connect. So your practice will be done in the context of your pod to help you integrate what you've learned in that module. We have a new partner, a business partner, Ovida, which has an extraordinary platform for practicing and to record yourself practicing and get feedback. And it's primarily being used right now in the leadership and coaching space around the world. But because I'm an advisor for them, I do a lot for them, and they're actually building a whole new half of what they offer that's built completely around integrative development. So I'm stoked because I finally get to see this built into a platform like this. And so we're going to give you access to that in week 4, so you can go on and practice this. And so like maybe you have a habit when people ask you questions of answering them. And so you might go on with your partner and have your partner ask you a bunch of questions, so you can practice not answering them. And again, it's not a direct. This is not meant to practice. I'm going to try to do ID really well so that David will approve of me. It's whatever you need to practice to unlock something in yourself to be able to work this way. And so, like, yeah. And so and so you can define with your peer pod. You'll have an assignment as a starting point. You can, again, use it, not use it, adapt it, not adapt it. But it's really a chance for you to practice something that would enable you to do this work more freely, rather than trying to copy or mimic something you've seen me do or that I'm going to instruct you how to do. We find the average person spends about 10 hours a month on the program if they do everything. Some do more because they do some side reading or they want to practice more, but that's about average for most people. We sort of cluster them into 3 groups of 3 modules. The first one's all about yourself and the ID way mindset. We don't teach you how to do the work itself yet, because many of you are going to try to do the work with an old mindset that's not going to be very effective. It's going to be painful for you and anybody you practice on. So there'll be a lot of composting for many of us. I couldn't go back to do work I did 10 years ago now if you paid me. Like I just couldn't even imagine standing in front of a group and having to entertain them and lecture them for 8 hours. Then we look at the IDWA process. This is where we get into the sort of the nuts and bolts of the learning model, the model itself, and lots of ways of practicing that and deconstructing and working with that. One of the things we do, Kim, from narrative coaching, is we work a lot at developmental thresholds for people. And so this is like really the heart of the program itself. And then the last one are about some specific IDWA skills. But then the last 2 modules are newer. We just started them this year. The first, module 8 is really about you trying to create an integration of everything you've pulled together from the program. What does it mean for you? Where do you want to begin with it? Where can you start? And module 9 is, like I may have said before, is completely about you creating the beginnings of your own ID way practice and what that looks like for you. And then we have a celebration in early October, which is a fun experience. So these are all the things that come with the program. And I'm not sure if there's anything I really need to say about that. I feel it's pretty self-explanatory. We're launching sort of a Mastermind with David program next year for graduates in ID, as well as some more resources or ID graduates. And so we're expanding our platform to help you find other ID practitioners, either in your area, physical area, or your area of interest. So we've had a number of ID practitioners now do projects together, which is a lot of fun. And we're also always soliciting people that want to write them up as case studies and or to publish what they've done in their project. Okay, I think that's it. So I'm going to take these down for now and just sort of see now after an hour, kind of where you're at and what would be helpful to you right now, if anything.
I mean, maybe just a very practical question, David. So it sounds like when you were going through the module, so the first 3 weeks, people are getting together on Zoom and that sort of stuff as a cohort. The fourth week sounds like they go into a pod.
Yeah.
And so what I'm wondering is those first 3 weeks that you're doing, is it like a 90-minute session, a 2-hour session? What's the timing?
I always miss the obvious question. So well done, Kim. Thank you. So the 2 live sessions, week 1 and 3, are 90 minutes. They're offered twice a day at 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. Eastern time. You can come to either of them or both of them. It doesn't matter. They're all recorded. So if you're away 1 week or you're sick or if something happens, you can always watch it. It'll be up on you we have a new platform, a much better platform than we had before, that has all your resources in it. It has a forum. We post a lot of things there. People like talking to each other there. You can ask questions of us. And then the second week, you're doing a field and a stretch assignment on your own. We have sometimes people buddy up and do them together. That's fine. Maybe you discover you have a friend in the program, or you like doing things in pairs. You can do that, but they're mostly for you, and only for your benefit. No one else sees it but you. And then the fourth one is done in a pod where you make arrangements together as to when you're going to meet. Again, we try to help be as close in time zones to give you more options. At the end of the program, we, in order to get your certificate of completion and the credit hours, we ask you to turn in a small portfolio, way smaller than before. Basically, it is create a graduation slide, which is a 1-slide just depiction of your journey and what you're taking from the program. And during graduation, we show everybody's slide and let you talk to them and say what was important to you. Those are Karen's done those, and they're quite fun. And it's a wonderful way to end the program. And then we ask you to write a 2 or 3 page or slide reflection on what are you leaving with, what's different for you now. And some people write 1 page, some people write 9 pages, some make beautiful slides, some make awkward Word documents. Doesn't matter, whatever works for them. And I read all of them, and it's quite lovely to watch what happens for people. And that's just, and those are, if you wrote nothing, then I might call you on that, but they're for you. They're not for me. I don't grade you. I don't evaluate them. I read them and love them, but it's what you need to feel you can take a step forward on your integration. Other questions or thoughts right now? Are you getting excited, Colleen?
I'm stoked.
Excellent.
Because here's the one thing I love about it, David, because you're talking about the individual. It gets to be all about me.
Exactly. Exactly. We're going to channel it. We're going to activate your healthy inner narcissist.
I love that.
Have you seen our prime minister?
No. Well, yes, no. Well, yeah. Yeah.
I'm very curious about the outcome 9 months or 11 months from now. I'm fine with the unknown, given that's kind of my business, is to hang out in mystery.
Yeah, exactly.
But in terms of a practitioner, I've always followed the model of you get trained, you become, certified, and then you say, I'm this.
Yeah.
And I really don't do that now. And so I'm like, well, this is going to be cool.
Yeah, so we used to offer certifications as part of our programs, but I just never felt good enough about them. People did great work for them, but it wasn't really any yeah, people did the best to their ability, but there was a wide range of people that would qualify as certified. And
Right.
I realized a long time ago, I don't want to be in the policing business. I don't want to be in the judging business. I think it's important. I want to know that my doctor knows what they're doing if I'm going to have surgery.
Right.
And so we are going to offer an advanced certification program next year, but it's going to be much more tied to projects.
Yeah.
And your own journey, and less about us vetting you. Yet we will do some of that more than we've ever done, but we'll do that later away from this. This is just an immersion for you. And you'll get a logo you can put at the bottom of your email saying that you're graduated from this. So you can put ID practitioner on your email. So you'll have that.
Seeing like a Girl Scout badge.
There you go. A little sash there. And
I mean, yeah, I'm not concerned at all about.
But if you misbehave, you're not going to get the good citizenship badge. So
whether
you
it's certification or not, because it's just that's the way I've approached my career since the beginning. It's just I did what flowed from me, got paid for it, thank God. But anyway, so I'm just real curious what shape, what's going to be my shape when I'm done.
Yeah, I'm curious too, and we won't know until you get there.
That's right.
So what most people, the most common outcome, if it's any reassurance, is people appreciate a new level of confidence and freedom to do what they do that they didn't have before. And they find ways to open up more possibilities with what they're already doing.
Mm.
And so, but we've had some wild things. Like one woman was a cancer survivor and got completely mucked over by the healthcare system as a woman with cancer. And so her ID mission was she had the means to take, I think, 6 or 9 months off, traveled the country, made bookings as she was going to talk to medical clinics about what women need from medical providers around cancer, because they're and she was talking to, I mean, she was going out to the Mayo Clinic. I mean, she was, and then the word started spreading, so it became easier and easier for her to get gigs, and she was on this crusade to bring an ID perspective to healthcare around women with cancer. And so people end up finding small projects to begin to think about them very differently. And then, because the focus in this in many ways is less about us, what actually I find satisfies our graduates more than that even is what they can do for their clients, to activate the inner ID person in their client, to go do this for themselves, to free their client from old stories, old boxes, old labels, old whatever. I just feel like we live in a time now where a lot of people are afraid and anxious, and so they're behaving badly. And there's also amazing things happening in the world, and I want to be able to contribute to that. And part of that means we need to learn differently, and we need to become more mature and less about more stuff and more about maturing ourselves as human beings. Yeah. Is there any questions you have before you go?
No, I do not have questions because David, I learned your narrative coaching from WBEX.
Oh, excellent. Wonderful.
I really enjoy your presentations. So I'm going to looking forward to your next presentation, because I think it's coming, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for today's
You're welcome.
session. Yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Anything else for today? All right. Well, have a wonderful rest of the day or evening, depending on what part of the world you're in. And I hope that you come and join us next year. And it's a fun adventure. This will be the last year I'm going to teach my programs live like this for a lot of reasons. But we're going to evergreen the programs and move much more towards application and deeper spiritual development. And I need more time to write because I don't have enough time to write when I'm running programs.
Yeah.
And I've done this for 20 some odd years, and it's time for a change. And we've got some wonderful faculty now who will help out. And so I'm looking forward to sort of like this farewell cruise of the SSS David. Yeah. And then I want to spend more time in the community, in our community, the MI community, doing different things now. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Be well, and we'll see you again soon.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much, David.
Thank you.
Thank you.
care,
Great to meet
everyone.
all of you.
All right. Bye.